Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Dave Iacovetti. What's up,
Hey,
Dave?
how you doing, Bill?
I'm great, man. I'm doing really good. Thank you for coming on my show, man. I appreciate it.
Good to be back. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, so how has it been? How's things been going?
They're going good, going good. A lot of things happening here in South Florida. My Club TV 24-hour channel is coming back in another month or so. You'll be able to watch music videos like MTV did back in the old days, but a
Yeah,
little better. We'll be taking you to clubs all over the world. Japan, Miami, New York, you name it, we're going.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
So
I'm excited.
yeah, so you have a lot of you have a crazy story, and I want to get into a little bit about your first recollections of your father. So
Sure.
when you were young, like so when you were growing up, do you want to tell the people where you were born and raised and who you are before we get
Sure.
started?
My father was Dave Iacovetti. He was a very well connected, supposed member of organized crime, the Gambino family specifically. He was in with Albert Anastasia, Carlo Gambino, Lucky Luciano back in the heyday of the mob, the early 30s. He was running crap games in Harlem on the street. A guy named Johnny Rabilato took notice of him, took him under his wing. Johnny Rabilato was Albert Anastasia's one of his main henchmen. He used to um, Shylock money, but he also owned restaurants. He owned funeral parlors. And the funny thing about him, my dad used to drive him around in a hearse, and he'd go collect the money in the hearse. And like I said, they didn't even have to get out of the car. These guys come out, give them the envelope as quick as possible, and off they went to the next stop.
Yeah, because
Um,
they were nervous that they might end up in the hearse, right?
that or the crematorium back at the one of the locations.
Yeah.
Always better to pay when you borrow from those guys, I believe.
So
But
when you were was your dad in New York City a lot, or was he based out of Florida?
well, he started in New York, and he had a home in Connecticut, and that was his original territory, if you would. But they called him, his real nickname was Davy Crockett. Carlo Gambino gave that to him and some of the guys because he would go to places that back then no guy from New York would ever want to go. The Bahamas, Haiti, Cuba, Florida. Even Florida back then was considered the wild, wild South. But my father loved boats. He loved sunshine, fishing, everything to do with the water. So he eventually landed here in South Florida. He originated, along with some partners from New York, Tony Roma's rib chain. He also originated the Bobby Rubino's rib chain. How that story goes is a bunch of guys are sitting around in North Miami on Biscayne Boulevard, and they're talking, and my father says, "Get Tony Roma out of the kitchen." And they brought Tony Roma out, and they go, "Tony, we're starting a rib chain. We're going to name it after you." And then that's where Tony Roma's was born, right there on Biscayne Boulevard in North Miami. After that was established, a few years later, he tied in with some other guys. They're sitting around another place. He goes, "Get Bobby Rubino out of the kitchen." Bobby came out, and they're like, "Hey, Bobby, we're starting another rib joint like we did with Tony. We're calling this one Bobby Rubino's." And then Bobby Rubino's was born, and then his partners actually took that over. A family uh, group of friends of his from New York, and they ran it afterwards. And then my father went on and opened, other restaurants. As far as me, my mom raised me and my little sister on her own. Most of the time, my father was in prison. The first time I can remember ever seeing him, he came to the hospital when I was born and signed all the birth certificate papers and everything, made me officially Dave Jr.
Yeah.
But then he got caught up in some indictments. He went away, and most of my young life, he was in prison. So I got to see him in spurts on and off until I turned 16. And by then he was out again. had another business, the Maryland Crab House in Dania, Florida, which is between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And he put me to work there. But my first memory of my father is quite ironic because we have hurricanes, tropical storms, bad weather all the time here in South Florida. And unfortunately, he was running boats to the Caribbean. He was friends with Papa Doc Duvalier, who was a dictator in Haiti. Yeah. Some story about that. I want to make a movie just about that incident one day, in which I play my dad in it. I can't wait for that one. I want to do it before I get too old. But at this time, he was actually running what they called junkets to Haiti. And they were rich gamblers, and they would go over there. My dad had a deal for casinos and so forth. And when he came to see me, it was, I believe, my 5th birthday. I get confused, the 5th and 6th, but looking back, it was probably my 5th birthday. And the power had been knocked out by a tropical storm. So my mother lit candles where we were at, and I had to see him by candlelight. And he brought me a cowboy hat, little 6 shooters to match, and an actual tournament dartboard. And my mother flipped out. I mean, it had the real darts, the real points. She knew about me. She's like, "Nah, you can't give him that. He'll be winging people in the back of the head."
Someone's gonna have a dart hanging out of their head, right?
So she nixed that. He took the dartboard back. And to this day, I'm very fond of tournament dartboards when I get my hands on them because of it. So then I didn't get to see my dad again until I was 14. And ironically, I had been reading about him in books in the library and his friends and all the different things that they would do. One guy, Vinnie Teresa, who later became an informant, he wrote 2 books with my dad in them. Well, those were 2 of the books I was reading about in the library. But him and his guys, they were tied in with Raymond Patriarca out of Massachusetts, and they did all kinds of things. I learned how to forge checks over the top of lampshades. You put a piece of glass down, and then you put the check on it with the real signature underneath it and with the light. So I was practicing all that, and then I started acting on what I was reading in those books. One of the things they had done, I didn't do this, but one of the things they did is they dressed up as moving men and pulled up in New York City in front of Macy's furniture showroom and said, "All right, we're changing the showroom," and they took out all this expensive furniture and loaded it up
into trucks, acting like they worked there.
Yes, and drove off with like 50,000, whatever it was, in furniture, and of course they never came back to replace it. So at 14, I mean, I have a wild imagination anyway. So I was just eating this stuff up. So then I began acting on him. I had this guy named Larry the Garbage Man, and he was a dumpster diver, and I'd give him $1 for every credit card receipt that he would get out of the dumpster from the restaurants and different stores. And back in the 70s, this was 77, 78, they just had a book. There was no call in, get authorization, none of that. So if your card wasn't in that book of bad numbers and everything else looked right, they went ahead and took the order and sent it out. And I could change my voice. I could sound like an old man. I could sound like a lady. I could sound like a Spanish guy. So I was eating it up. I was ordering pistachios from Iran. I was the first kid on my block with a full-blown pinball machine and Atari game. The kids in the neighborhood loved me. I had my own little mob, if you would. There was a couple of bodybuilders that worked out at a gym next to where my restaurant, my mother's, she worked as a waitress in a Royal Hungarian restaurant on Miami Beach. And that was kind of like my command post at the fruit stand there. So I would give these guys $50 a week in case I ever needed them. I never did, but I mean, I had muscle, my connections, and I was doing really well for a minute. So as he was coming out of prison, I had started impersonating an IRS agent and collecting back taxes from people that didn't know him.
That's crazy for you to be that young and putting together intricate criminal enterprise at that age is pretty crazy.
It's gonna make a hell of a movie. You know, I gotta find the right little Italian kid to play me in it, and another one to play my dad, and that's gonna be one hell of. I can't wait to watch it myself. So, and I lived it. So they put together a task force. Miami Beach Police, the Social Security Division sent agents from Atlanta, the IRS sent agents from New York, and they had a whole task force looking for what they thought was this group of con men. And they caught me. I got busted coming out of one of the banks where I would meet the people to collect the money, because I would do it all over the telephone, and then I'd say, we'll send the office boy to your bank and make it easy for you. And then I would go collect the cash, walk them to the taxis. Nobody was ever hurt. It was pretty harmless as far as that goes. Their wallets got hurt, but nobody was physically hurt. And then I pulled that stunt bill on one lady, and she was an actual fiction writer, and she didn't buy it for a minute. So as soon as she hung up with me, she called the cops, and they had been waiting for that break. And sure enough, the next morning I went to get the money, and they came down on me with helicopters, guys with shotguns, a SWAT team. There was a taxi cab I was trying to get get away from him, and he turned out to be an undercover cop. They grabbed him, and he whipped out his badge, and I wouldn't have got far had I made it. So I was going behind bars as my dad was getting out of bars, from behind bars. He helped me out. He sent a couple of guys down and paid for an attorney for me. And my mother, God bless her, she got me not out of it. I had to go to a program. I did some time in youth hall.
Were you afraid that your dad was going to like whoop your ass from doing all that? Were you afraid?
His friends were calling him up saying, Dave, real chip off the old block, because I was on the front of the Miami Herald, and I made like 7 other newspapers across the country. He was more concerned with being implicated in something that I did.
Yeah, because it was big. I read the story, and it was big back then. Like, it was a big deal.
It was a big deal, and thank God it all got swept under the rug, thanks to my mother's efforts, friends of the family's efforts. And I've only brought it back now after 40 years in the past couple of years, because I'm writing the books and telling the stories. Otherwise, it's nothing I'd want anyone to know about. But so I got tied up there for about 1.5 to 2 years with probation and, the whole 9 yards. Once I heard those iron doors clanging behind me, though, I knew I didn't want to be a criminal. So I moved into the entertainment business. But around the age of 16, I had paid my dues. And my father had said about that particular incident, he goes, son, if I had just been driving down the street that day and saw you walking along and said, get in the car, let me give you a ride home. He goes, and then they busted you. He goes, they would have never believed that I wasn't part of that. You make me nervous, son. So, and I continued to make him nervous till his last days. I'm like, at one point he goes, if you're smart, you'll change your name. And I go, you change your name. But now
You're just like me and my father was. We had the same name. I was a junior. I was the third, though.
Oh, okay.
You're
I was the second. There may be a third coming one of these days in the near future. Right now, I have a little girl who's my pride and joy. She's 23.
And my daughter's 17. Shout out to my daughter. Shout
out. And I even told her one time, I said, listen, if you want, you can change your name. Said, oh, no, I am Iacovetti. I keep my name. She's grown up in Europe with my ex-wife and her mama. So I see her, not as much as I like to. She's coming soon again. Thank you, God. And I get to take her on a tour of Miami and hear her little French accent. But, there may be a junior coming one of these days. We'll see. But, I made my dad nervous all the way to the very end. But while I was around him, the books had said a lot, but the respect and the guys that I got to meet with him, lots of them were icons in their own right. So he was friends, like I said, with all of them. I mean, at one point I was sitting across from Meyer Lansky at Wolfie's Restaurant in Miami Beach. And on the other side of the table was George Foreman and Don King. I had dinners and met lots of guys I knew by the first name, and it turned out they were some of the highest ranking organized crime figures in the country that would come through my dad's restaurant. The Crab House was later turned into Roberto's, which was pretty infamous as a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale as a mob hangout. And then be careful what you wish for. I had always wanted that. My dad said that's your inheritance, is that restaurant. And then one day I got it in my early 20s. He was away again at this time. They had come down on the Gambino family hard because of the new hierarchy that came in, John Gotti and all his people. And my father was from the prior regime, if you will. And, you know, at this time, he was a businessman. He was 70 years old. He didn't want, you know, he had already paid his dues and done his time. But you never leave that world. You know, once you're in it.
He already went to prison, came out, and so he's out at this point, right?
Yeah, he's out. But they came down on, like I said, New York, and my father got tied up in that. And they took my father down too. Actually, they paid a guy 50 grand who was someone my father kind of just felt sorry for. You'd have the guy come by, let him hang out, you know, give him a meal or two or whatever. And this guy, they paid 50 grand to testify that he heard my father say that he was a member of the Gambino family. Those words would never come from my father's mouth. I mean, I know that much. I mean, the word mafia or, you know, mob, organized crime, it would make my dad cringe. Because he's from an era where respect, silence, diplomacy, a cool head ruled, you know. After that,
he wouldn't sit down ever and just talk to you about being made, would he?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. His friends would. You know, they'd take me for, you know, on trips, or we'd be somewhere doing something or whatever. And the old timers would say, you got to know about your dad. And they would tell me things like, he's got 23 notches in his gun belt. He took one guy by the house on the way to the Poconos and he was never seen again, that guy.
Oh, man.
But my father, no. He would tell me stories about life, about my grandfather, about him growing up. And, you know, and anytime someone would talk about anything connected to that world in front of him to me, he would set him straight. Look, my son is not part of this. You know, go get some cheese out of the kitchen, kid. You know, and he'd get me, you know, off the table or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I had at one point wanted to follow his footsteps. But then after doing that and getting caught and, you know, seeing the other side of that world, I realized, thank God at a young age, because had I pulled that stunt when I was 21 or 22, I wouldn't have seen daylight for 15, 20 years. Yeah.
Especially nowadays, man, they don't play around when it comes to swindling people out of money.
I had a friend of mine I went to school with by the name of Ronny Zamora. He was pretty famous back then too. He had broken into a neighbor's house. He lived in a real ritzy neighborhood, and the lady caught him. Family friend, actually, and he had just found her gun, and he shot her. And she's dying in the chair in her living room, and she goes, "Ronny, how could you do this? I've known you since you were a kid, a baby." And she goes, "Pour me a scotch." And he went over, he poured her a scotch, she drank the scotch, she died. He took her money, her gun, and he went to Disney World with his friends for the weekend. And when he came back, Miami Beach police was waiting on him. So he had the same attorney that I had. He was a real famous criminal attorney named Ellis Rubin back in the day. And Ellis Rubin mounted a defense that television, you know, Man X, all the TV shows, you know, A-Team, that because of all the violence on the TV shows from the 70s, it caused this kid not to know reality from fiction, and that's why he did it. The court didn't buy it. He got 40 years, and he just got out a few years ago. So I think of that guy, and I'm thinking, you know, how close I was to going down that road, and here this guy lost his entire life, 40 years behind prison. He was 15 when he went in. You know, I thank God that I got into the entertainment business. At 16, I got to work on Porky's. Then I got to work on Absence of Malice with Paul Newman, Sally Field, got to hang out with them. And then later on, I got Scarface with Al Pacino over there. I got to meet him and hang out with him. And
Madonna, right?
yeah, I mean, all the stars of the day were around that movie set. I got to work on it for 2 weeks. And I was hooked at that point. You know, the
Here's your
mom.
buddy. Here's your buddy.
Yeah, there he is. Elvis Rubin.
Yeah. This is the attorney that got the guy off. This was back in the day.
Yeah. Well, he didn't get Ronny Zamora off. Ronny Zamora, like I said, he got life. Well, I think it was life, but he wound
Well,
up
yeah,
getting out for 40 years.
well, he had him as a lawyer. This was the guy, right?
Yes, Alice
Yeah.
Rubin. Yes. Yeah, and he was my lawyer too. Very expensive, I might add.
So when you were growing up, right, with your dad being in prison, some of the time, did you hold resentments for him being in prison?
I just felt bad that he was in prison. I didn't ever hold a resentment to him. I had heard so much about him from my grandfather, my uncles, my mother, other people that I've always held him in the highest esteem, even when we weren't getting along. And we had some times where I rubbed him the wrong way, and vice versa. But I've always held him in the highest esteem. You know, I've heard stories since, you know, about him, but as far as anything goes, anything he ever did with me, he was always the best. I mean, he was a dad as much as he could be when we were together and we were around. Try to teach me the right things, keep me on the right track, and I'm very thankful for that and honored, you know, to have him as my dad. And that's mainly what this book was about. You know, growing up with my dad, being around him, and what, you know, the family life point of view was. I'm going to do a second book. I'll talk about more stories in that. Cyril DePaggio, a close friend of mine, has shot a pilot based on that, but in fictional form. And that hopefully will be a future Sopranos, South Florida type of TV show. And we're waiting to see what happens with that. And then documentary. Yeah, that one is my first work of fiction. And a friend of mine's daughter, she's 13 years old, decided to write a essay for the entire school in the auditorium and do a book report on that book, which is very adult oriented when you read it. I was shocked that a junior high school student would want to, you know, make that her presentation, but she did, and it was in front of the 7th, 8th grade of a Broward County junior high school with all the faculty. And the head of the faculty wrote a letter, and her teacher to the mother, and said they couldn't believe how well she did and how good the story was, and they were wondering if there was going to be a part 2 to that one, and that they're adding that book to the school's curriculum next year.
Wow, yes. That's crazy.
And it's like really adult oriented. I mean, it's got the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, killings. I mean, I guess things have progressed a lot in junior high since I dropped out. I dropped out in the 8th grade. And that was the end of my elementary school. I went back later. I got my GED, and then I went on to college and studied film and acting, and that's my major, drama education. But again, to hear that Broward County was that impressed with the story, it's like, okay, time for part 2 on that one as well.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Ciro and Mob King and all that.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you were younger, coming up, did you want to go into the movies? And what was your first dealings when you were when you went to, you said Porky's, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, actually, the first movie that I was on was Absence of Malice. You know, it's so long ago now.
Shout out to Ciro.
There he is. My man. Was Absence of Malice. I worked on that as a production assistant. I got to meet Paul Newman, Sally Field, and Porky's was right around the same time. I can't remember which one came first, honestly, now. I'll have to look up the records on that. But then on Porky's, we had a blast. I worked on that for a week. And the director, rest his soul, Bob Clark, made the mistake of bringing donuts to 80 teenage extras and we had this huge tent. And all of a sudden, one of the donuts came sailing across and hit one of the kids in the head. And dude, it was on. We almost all got fired because it was the biggest donut fight, food fight that I'd ever been in my life. And they lined us all up and said, "You guys are this close. We'll get new extras if anything happens again." And then I went on to land Scarface, which was the greatest job of my life. Was working on that for 2 weeks at the Fontainebleau Hilton. I was a refugee on a bus with a big straw hat. In another scene, I was a guy down on the.
Was that when he was when they had all the people from what was it, Cuba? With the fence around them, right? Yeah, I remember that, man.
Yep. Yeah. Every time I passed that, it was done under an intersection just off Brickell Avenue in downtown Miami. And if you're going to Key Biscayne or South Miami, you go right by where, and there was actually a tent city there before the movie shot it. They recreated the movie.
Oh, so they just put up fences and they put people in there, and that's where they live?
Yeah. Yeah. And then the buses came, and as soon as they could, fingerprint them and find out who they were, they would, send them out by school buses. And I was one of the guys on the school bus. They dressed me up. I had a straw hat. I was a Marielito. Off I went. But where you see me, which you took that picture out of the last time we spoke, that was at the Fontainebleau Hilton. And that was the second week I was working on the film. And that's when I got to interact with him and Stephen Bauer and, all the cast of Scarface.
That absence of malice. I got a quick picture of it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's all
not a famous movie. Not a famous movie, but on the set where we were shooting, a baby manatee had wandered into the marina there, Crandon Park Marina. And I was telling one of the assistant directors, "Hey, there's a manatee. They're highly protected, endangered species here in South Florida." And Paul Newman was walking by and he heard, he goes, "Kid, show me where this manatee is." And he took me in. I went over and I showed him the manatee. And him and Sidney Pollack, the director, went out there on a rowboat, stopped production on this multi-million-dollar movie. And the two of them led that baby manatee out of the marina back out into the ocean. And I remember that more than I remember anything else from that job. But that hooked me. Between the three movies, I was hooked as I knew what business I wanted to be in, and it wasn't in the crime business for sure.
So, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah,
you look a little stiff in your picture, but
I don't know what happened with my video, man.
I don't know. It's not the camera off the side.
Yeah, I'm trying to mess with it right now. Let me see if I can get this.
Is that a young Bill in that picture I'm seeing?
Yeah, that was me when I was in prison.
Oh, wow, you look like a kid.
Yeah, I was a kid.
Yeah.
Damn, I don't know what's going on with my computer. Hold on.
Boom, there you are. I was lucky. I missed out on the college degree of going to prison, thank God. I was in jail, though, even though I learned my ways as far as stealing money from people goes. But I still had a bad attitude and a bit of a chip on my shoulder. So I went to jail over 50 times in Dade and Broward County as a young man, teenager. The longest I would say probably. I went later and got a special professional license. I was an insurance agent for a minute about 10 years ago, and I had to get every single police report of me being arrested. And my niece was 17 at the time. She'd known me all her life, and she was flabbergasted when I'm sitting there with this stack of pagers.
You're like, here's my rap sheet.
It looks something like that, yeah. I'll show you the mugshots. One day I'll do a documentary and just put all the mugshots in it. But it was always bullshit. It was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, trespassing, fighting, disorderly conduct, driving without a license. Never stealing or anything like that again. I nipped that in the bud.
You got me
Thank God.
beat. I got 26. I've been arrested 26 times.
Wow. Wow.
You said 50 son. You've been arrested 50 son, right?
I would say close to it. Yeah, I haven't actually counted it, but I got up. I was counting. I got up to like 40 something, and there were still some more files that but again, those were like 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. The longest I ever got was some friends of mine had burglarized the Omni Hotel, and I had been at work as a mortgage broker, telemarketer. I would call for the mortgage brokers. I was 18 at that time. And I would take the bus back to Miami Beach, and I got off at the Omni in downtown Miami because some friends of mine told me they were going to be there. And they all come running over, all these thugs of the day. This is the late 80s, mid 80s. And they hand me these keys, all these multicolored keys. And I go, what's this? And they go, oh, those are the keys from the room. We lifted them from behind the front desk. And they're showing me cameras and all this stuff. And as they're talking to me and I'm looking at these keys, I look behind them and I see these Miami cops, these Omni security guards all rushing across the street right at me. And sure enough,
they come
they
after
came
you.
up and I'm sitting there with the keys in my hand. They take me too, boy.
Oh, man.
So I was guilty by association there, and I wound up spending the longest time behind bars as an adult because I'm 18 now, just turned 18. I think I was 2 weeks straight. 2 weeks straight in the Stockade, which is kind of like Dade County Jail, but worse. It's like where you don't want to go. You'd rather be at Dade County.
I could imagine back then what was that, in the 80s or 70s?
Yeah.
That was the 80s, right? Early 80s. Mid 80s.
Yeah, mid 80s.
I wouldn't want to be there, man.
Yeah, that was a tough one. A couple of guys had telephones smashed against the side of their skulls while I was in there. So when my time was up for the phone, I didn't stay any longer than I was supposed to. Trying to prove I was.
Yeah, I don't think I got to use the phone the first time. I just sat there and waited till my time was up to go home. Like,
right?
No, fuck that phone, man. They can have it.
Yeah. So ironically, though, I wound up spending the most of my time as an adult behind bars for something I absolutely didn't do. They dropped the charges because there was proof. I was at work. I had the time card. I had, witnesses I was there. So they wound up dropping the charges. But, you're guilty until proven innocent. So, in jail I went for those 2 weeks. And, my father wasn't going to come help me out for something stupid like that. So I didn't even bother calling him or telling him. God bless my mom, the angel that she was. She came, she got me out. But it did take a couple of weeks to get out of there. So then I learned too, be careful who you hang around because you don't have to do anything to get locked up. You just be in the wrong place, wrong time, and away you go. But while I was in the car, a funny anecdote to that story is the cops were so angry about what had gone on, they left me with the kid who had stolen the keys. And they rolled the windows up, turned the motor off, and went up to the 17th floor. Now, the car, this is Miami, summertime.
Hot.
We're baking, literally, sweat's rolling down my face. And this kid, Eric, I'll never forget, he's like, I'm dying. I got asthma. I'm going to die. I said, listen, if you don't tell them I had nothing to do with it, you're going to be dead, all right.
Yeah,
and not
I'm going to kill you.
I go, move your head. And he leaned back, what are you going to do? And I kicked out the cop window. And this black cop was about 6 feet tall. He was in no mood to play. You kicked out my 17. Dude, they stuffed me and cuffed me like a pig. They buckled my ankles to my wrists. They picked me up and dropped me like a bag of potatoes face first on the pavement. Then they threw me in the back on the floorboard of another Miami cop car, and they got a call for some hooker was like on the run, and they had to catch her. And the next thing I know, man, I'm sure they did it on purpose. They're swinging down alleys and speeding and stopping.
Yeah,
I had scars on my wrist forever from that thing. And then finally they took me to the jail. I was never so happy to get into Dade County Jail in my life as I was from that. And I hadn't done nothing. Just, again, being with the wrong people, wrong place, wrong time.
Do you
So
think you having your dad's name probably maybe wore off on your reputation and all that? Do you think maybe the cops used your dad's last name as a crutch to go after you more?
I'll tell you, the cops, when they would stop me, and I was stopped a lot because, we were out on the street. We weren't a street gang, but we were out. Everybody's going to sleep, and me and all these teenage kids are hitting the road. Miami was murder capital of the world at that time. Some of the cops liked me and my friends, some didn't. Some went out of their way to cause us trouble on Miami Beach. Um, but I had many incidents over my whole lifetime in which I'd be pulled over by a cop. I remember one vividly. We got out. He had me get out of the car. We're talking. I had a friend of mine with me, laughing. We're joking. He ran my name, and all of a sudden, as soon as it came back, whatever they said in code, he unstrapped his gun holster, and he goes, "Why is there a warning on your name for law enforcement to be careful with?"
Yeah, because of your dad.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but most of the time it was positive things about my father because he was really respected. He wasn't one of those guys that he probably did a lot more good for people than he did bad. Uh, but you don't hear about that. It's like Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, a good friend of my father's, he would help people all the time. One guy was going to prison for tax evasion or something. He was an old actor. I forgot who it was. Joe Louis, maybe. He was a boxer. And my father just gave him my
That's
father.
Carlo Gambino and
Sammy, another friend of my father, Sammy Davis,
yeah.
was friends of my dad. But Frank Sinatra wrote the guy gave the guy a blank check and said, just write what you need, and saved him from going to prison. And he got to die in the old folks home instead of prison, thanks to Sinatra. But you never heard that from Sinatra. That came from people that knew what he'd done. So I think my dad did a lot of good too. You just didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably had it out for him.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, when Joe Galacci came out back in the '60s and confirmed there was such a underground criminal operation as La Cosa Nostra, they were out to get anyone that was part of that. Even Sinatra himself had a hard time because he had friends like my father. And there's FBI records. I researched a lot of them. One of them says that one of Dave Iacovetti's children is a godchild to Frank Sinatra. I'm pretty sure that's my older sister. I have an older half sister up north, and I'm pretty sure that was the Godfather. But I did get to meet him. He did offer to adopt me as a baby. My father didn't go for it. My mother would have never gone for it. I even asked my dad. I said, "Hey, why didn't you let him adopt me?" He's like, "Because you'd never talk to me again."
Yeah, because you're my kid. I'm not giving you up. He's like, fuck that. I'm not giving you up, man.
But I'll tell you, as much as I gave both my parents a lot of stress and aggravation, my father wasn't a guy to say "I love you," right? I guess that just wasn't in his nature. But one conversation we had at his restaurant, and he goes, "Son, I want you to know, I may not be here to see it." He goes, "But I know that one day you're going to succeed at what you want to do, and you're going to be very successful. And I want you to know that I know this is going to happen." And I wish he was around now to see it. He wouldn't like the book about it probably because he doesn't like to be on Front Street. But a lot of the other successes that I've had while he was alive, I know made him proud. But to see how well I'm being received now with the books and the projects and the different things that I'm doing, and they're all legal, they're legitimate. We pay our taxes, we get the business license. We go over in a board because my name is on there to make sure, because a lot of people get it confused. Just because my dad was, a big shot in that world doesn't make me one.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people who are descendants of gangsters, they use that as a crutch sometimes. They use it as, my dad was a gangster, I'm this and that. So people think that they're like that too. Sometimes they are like that, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, sometimes it's the opposite.
Right.
It all
Let's put it
depends.
this way, Bill. If I was, I'd be the last person to ever say it.
Yeah, and I don't think you'd be all over YouTube and all that. Now, that's a question I want to ask you. What do you think your dad would think about you being on YouTube and people talking about organized crime and admitting they exist and Sammy the Bull being on YouTube? What would your dad think about all that?
He's probably turning over in his grave, because you got to realize none of that happened until Paul got whacked at Sparks Steakhouse. And Paul, he was the last of the old guard. So everything changed then. I was talking with someone else. If you notice, you know, after Sammy turned informant, they became a dime a dozen. Everybody was turning, and nowadays it really doesn't exist anymore. Whatever remnants of the real um, leftovers of that world, they're all legitimized now. They're in legitimate businesses. The last thing you hear is, threatening, coercing, talking, and mentioning it even. So my dad would probably be mortified about how it is now. But he was pretty much done with it before the new hierarchy of John Gotti and those guys came to power. He was 70 years old by then. There's one book that they wrote about my dad, and they said, he was 70 years old. He didn't want any part of that. But for sure, he wouldn't want any part of the way that it was through the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Even some of his close associates wound up turning. I remember meeting Tumac, Anthony Acetero, at my dad's apartment in Dania. And then years later, I found out that he had turned informant. It just blew me away, because he is one of the guys that I was thinking so highly of. But, the guys that are in that world still are related to that world, very few approach me. There's only been a few that actually reached out, and ironically, none of them lived long afterwards. Had nothing to do with me. But unfortunately, Anthony Aceturo contacted me. He said, "Hey, our parents were friends. Our dads. Let's get together." And I was really busy at the time. I said, "Sure, let's do that." And then, not long, a month or two later, he passed away. And then another guy had done the same. He was another person that was known in that area, and I actually met him a couple of times and spoke with him, and we talked about the past. And then not long after that, he died, natural causes, I believe. And then there was a third guy who I won't mention his name. He recently reached out to me, so I think the word is out. Just stay away from that kid for whatever reason.
Get you sucked into some bullshit.
Yeah, and that's fine with me, because the more you associate with known people, whether they be cartel members or mob members or terrorists or whatever, you're roped right in there. You're branded automatically. You don't even have to be. Just be branded.
I know. I've interviewed quite a bit of mafia related guests, and I think they brand me. And some people are like, "Are you in the mob?" I'm like, "Nah, man. I just interview people. I'm not no part of anything." Right?
You're a true crime reporter.
Yeah. I just make content, real content for YouTube. Real content.
Yeah, I've had people say similar stuff to me, and I make it clear I only kill people on film.
Yeah.
In books and in the movies.
I'll only slaughter your ass on YouTube, man, if you come at me. Shout out to the North End stories.
But I'll tell you, being in the entertainment business is a lot like being in the mob, man. There's so many cutthroats and crazy things and backstabbing and, thieving and everything else. I mean, I had a good friend of mine got indicted back in 2008. He was partners with me in Club TV, actually, Joe Rubo and his brothers. They're pretty infamous in South Florida. But all I did, with him is I knew him from my father and from entertainment projects that we had worked on. But he got indicted, and he came to me before. He goes, "Dave, you're going to see it all over the news." He goes, "I just want to tell you ahead of time what's going on." And I'm like shaking my head. I'm like, "Joe, we're right here. It's legitimate. Why in the world would you do something on the side that would be illegal?" And he's like, well, I understand. He goes, but I don't think you're going to be swept up into it. Well, not long after he went away, I had an FBI agent come to me. He was actually a Broward sheriff on loan to organized crime, FBI. And he goes, Dave, you know, you were this close to being indicted too. And I go, for what? He said, just for being there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, man. That conspiracy charges nowadays and all that, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, George Raft, my mother's watching in the background, and she said that was for George Raft, who was like the ultimate gangster in the movies in the 30s and 40s and there. And he had gotten in trouble with the IRS, and Sinatra gave him a blank check and said, just fill in what you need. And he got to stay. He got to stay, and it was over $1 million too. So it wasn't small chump change either.
That's crazy, man.
So there's a lot of good that goes on.
Your smoke detector needs a new battery, man. You hear the chirp?
Yes. Is that what that is?
Yup, that's exactly what that is.
Okay, thanks.
Make sure you get on that right away.
Yeah, right.
So you're involved with the movies and all that. Shout out to CRO and all the partners you have in that aspect. I'm going to be coming down to Florida in the next couple of months. I've been so busy up here in Minnesota. I came from Connecticut to Minnesota. Got a bunch of things going on out here, and it's been great. Things have been really good. So I want to talk about the movies, man. What it was like to get into the movies, and for the people out there who want to break into the movies, what's your advice that you would have for them to break into either writing a book or getting into the movie industry?
Well, you know, it's all about believing in yourself. You know, I always was overconfident, I guess, because of, you know, the successes I had in my younger days. But if you believe in yourself and you act on it, and every day you move in that direction, I think you can accomplish anything you want in America. You know, I've lived in Europe, I've lived overseas. They don't have the opportunities that we have here. So America is designed for people to follow their dreams and accomplish them. And but my advice would be is to learn everything you can about whatever it is you want to do. I was always creative. I always wrote different stories. It wasn't until the past few years that I actually completed a book and then took it and had it published and so forth. And then after I broke through that ice, it's been one success after another after another. So I think the first step is having that first success and then staying on it. Once you get there, once you get in that field, whatever it is. But in South Florida, we have a lot of opportunities here with films. Most of the time they come from New York, they come from LA, they film and they leave. But with South Florida now, it's more and more homegrown type of productions going on. There's a lot of talent here, directors, producers, and they're putting together projects.
Like you have To Hell and Back. You have do you do part of the Cairo Killers too?
No, I've got silent partners with Ciro that we're partners on. It's about a fictional version about my dad and some of the things that went on while my dad was here in South Florida. I have Hell and Back, which we actually shot, and it's being finished up now in post-production. And that's the story.
See that one, man. I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, that's going to be something else. And what else? Club TV we have. And there's some other things going too. I got a couple more books that will be coming out as well. And a couple more fictional stories that we want to turn into film. So I think that within the next 2 to 3 years, I'm going to have a lot more projects out that people can actually watch and see and judge for themselves what their thoughts are. Yeah, there's silent partners right there.
Do you want to explain to the people what Club TV is? Yeah,
so Club TV basically is like MTV was when it originally started. It's music television. But now we're taking it to the next level of a 24-hour channel. So with Club TV, you could sit at home and go to clubs all over the world and see music videos from the past 30, 40 years that you may not see anywhere else except on YouTube. We're going to have a 24-hour feed going, and it'll be like stepping into a time machine in the musical nightclub world. You'll actually be able to go to some clubs that you can only go to by watching Club TV, because we have footage from some of those clubs that don't exist anymore
Like
from the
Studio
80s.
54 and all that.
Exactly. Club New in Miami Beach, Club 1235, Mansion. I mean, Prince had a club for a minute down here as well, Glam Slam. Um, we even
The
have
one on
Chuck
first,
Berry.
he has the one on First Avenue. I drive by it every day.
Yeah.
Well, he
That's
had.
right. He's from Minneapolis, right? Or he was.
Yeah, he was from Minneapolis. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm going to Paisley Park. I'm gonna do the private. I'm gonna do the private tour. I'm gonna get a lot of content for the people. That's for you guys. I'm getting it for.
Nice. Nice. Well, I think you're doing a great job, man. I've been watching your shows ever since right after you started, and it's quite a different look that you have as far as looking into the eyes of these people you have as guests on there. And I wish you all the best. I love seeing it. You know, I love seeing people
Yeah,
succeed.
the level of success. I think people are have a warped reality of what success is. Because to me, what success is to break away from the addictions of alcohol and drugs. So to me, I'm successful. I don't care about the views on YouTube. I don't care about how many people like me. I care about I was able to get sober and live a normal life like everybody else, and I'm truly blessed for that. And that's
God
I
bless you, man.
I feel like I made it. So all these people about, oh, you don't get views, you don't good. I don't care. Like I got what I want. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
And at the end of the day, you got to please yourself. Nobody else is gonna. You know, I love myself maybe a little too much, but you know, look, not everybody's going to like what you're doing. Not everybody's going to like you. I gave up trying to be everybody's best friend a long, long time ago. Either you like me or you don't. Just don't stand in my way.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to be putting their foot in my way. I'm just gonna run your ass over.
You just gotta trample them because there's a lot of slow moving oxen out there that would love to stop progress in its tracks. And I just whoo,
Yeah, there's a lot of hot garbage fires going on out there. I need to extinguish.
yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of two-faced people. You have a lot of people that will approach you under the assumption of helping you or liking you or whatever, and they're just there to start fires. And you got to be careful. Again, it goes back to who your circle is. I have a very small circle. I love everybody. Unless you give me a reason not to, you know, I'll be the best guy you ever met. You know, but I don't
Yeah,
go out of my way. I don't go out of my way. Either you like what I'm doing or you don't. And that's why with the school, like in Dr. Minch, it really surprised me because I thought if anything, you know, they'd be like, you know, there's drugs in there, there's sex in there,
yeah.
there's a doctor. Sorry about that.
It's all good, man.
Uh, see if I can get back in there now. Bear with me.
Hold on, I'll try to pop it off. Maybe it'll come back on.
Turn that fan off because that's what's making the squeaky noise he's talking about.
You're good. Boom, you're back.
We'll fix it and edit, right? Bill?
This is live, man. This is
Oh.
live.
Oh, well, so much for that.
You're like, we'll fix it and edit. No, this is live, man. It's going on TV right now. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of it.
Funny.
Yeah, we can fix it down the
See,
road.
right? The haters heard me talking about it and then sabotage.
Yeah, man. They sent a breeze, knock your phone over.
Right.
So I was hanging out in downtown Minnesota. Guess who pops in to the club, man? Chuck Liddell.
Oh, wow.
Chuck Liddell. I go get the. I go, that's Chuck Liddell, man. So I go up to him like, hey man, can I get a picture with you, man? And he goes, yeah, sure. So I take the phone and I got the phone and I'm like, but it's on video. So I always take videos. So I hit the phone and it's on video. And he's like, oh shit. I go, yo, I'm with the Iceman. And he comes up, it's like this. It was awesome.
You gotta love it. See, you gotta be quick on your feet.
Yeah, man. So what do you got coming for the future? What do you got planned for the future for club TV and everything else? What's
Well, we have a
your
new
next
corporation.
step?
Me and my little brother Michael Ward. He's got stories that make movies of his life. He's another one who went out. He's in Hell and Back. Actually, you can actually hear some of his stories there, where he went down the wrong road, wound up in a lot of trouble, and then turned his life around. But he's my partner on this corporation, and basically the corporation is going to have Club TV as a 24-hour channel, like I said. But then we're also going to produce independent films and other TV shows as we progress along, and just be a Florida-based television movie production company. And then write books. But to be honest with you, Club TV is something that I've done on and off for many, many years. I'm good at it. I know how to get it going again. But then I want to let some younger people take it over. It's a younger man's type of job. I'll be there in the beginning, but then I want to move off from television and just work on movies and write books. That's my ideal way of spending my later years. Is that, and
Yeah,
that's been a dream. That's been a dream since a kid. Since I worked on them as an extra, I always wanted to make them myself and make movies that people would like to see and don't insult the viewer, which a lot of these movies today, to me, is just dribble. I can't even watch a lot of them.
yeah, some of it's crazy, man. I was having an argument with someone the other day about how good what that Sopranos one was. I'm like, it wasn't good at all. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, it was a
Sopranos?
classic. I'm like, bro, it was terrible, man. It was terrible. The
I like to
acting
find
was I
good
didn't
and
like the
bad in
acting.
everything.
It was too much with the acting and the whole black and white thing. It was just not a good look, man. They need to stop doing that. They're trying to bring a whole race. They're pulling out the race thing and it's just not. Just don't do all
Yeah. I mean, you could be controversial, with what you're doing, but then also you can go overboard with that and give the wrong impression too. I
that. Yeah,
just kind of like to put
the riots and all this shit. It's just like it
it's
was
crazy
terrible.
world. But I
I,
like to
I
do films that touch people, like
yeah, it's
Godfather.
like reality films, right? Like true.
Yes, that you could relate to. That like Godfather to me was like being at my dad's restaurant when I watched The Godfather. I was like 11 years old. But to me, that was as really realistic. I didn't even see it as a film. It's like I could relate guys to almost every one of those characters.
So
you
what
know.
you would be in the restaurant, people would just come in, pay respects to your dad.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, every night was another feast of the imagination of real life people that would come through those doors and have dinner and see my dad and invite him out. Like there was the Black Tuna Gang actually were friends with my dad, and one day he goes, "Come on, son," and we left the restaurant. We hopped on one of his boats. He had 3 boats, and we went down to Indian Creek Drive across from the Fontainebleau at this huge mansion. And there was this Italian party with everything you could possibly imagine food wise, and all these guys in suits talking Italian, and the boats coming and going. That was a movie to me in itself, right there. So I want to, at the same time entertain people, but also educate them and not insult them. Because a lot of that, like I said, you could be very insulted if you have half a brain and you watch some of these things that are out.
It's pretty crazy. I would have been hooked on it too, man, because I remember just watching parts of different movies when I was younger, and I'm like, damn, I want to do that when I'm older. And now I get to be in the clubs and playing music for for a different level of people, man. So that's success to me, you know? And
It's
it's great, man. I wouldn't
giving
change my
back.
life for anything.
Giving back, I found that a lot of people now I understand it. I didn't understand it when I was younger. I had a couple of mentors that were big in the TV radio business here. Big Wilson was one. I think he was up from your way, up from Minnesota somewhere, and he had moved to South Florida. He became a big TV personality
But
in the
I'm
80s.
from Connecticut.
Yeah, my dad, that's his second hometown, Bridgeport. He had Valley Farms Drive in there, I think in Trumbull, and then he has a home in Bridgeport that my half sister has up there. But yeah, I want to give back. I want to help, and I want to, anyone else that I come across that wants to be in the entertainment business, any way I can help, I want to help, and I think that's part of it. When you get to some point, is helping others, to continue on where you leave off.
Definitely, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, man. You're always a great person to have on. And I want to
Thank
give
you.
a shout out to briansangels.org. You guys go check them out. She's a homeless outreach person out there in Connecticut that I used to work with. And she helps the community a lot. So go check her out.
God bless him.
briansangels.org. So, Dave, you want to give anyone shout outs before we go? Or you want to
Shout
plug
out
any of
to
your projects or anything?
just stay tuned for Club TV. It'll be a 24-hour channel you can access online at www.clubtv.me. And the ME stands for you, not so much me, because everybody's going to have a part of that is in the nightlife industry and so forth. Shout out to Ciro DiPaggio, Joe Rubo, and all those others out there on the hustle in the entertainment business. Good luck, God bless, and Godspeed.
Boston Bruins fan 24 says Club TV sounds cool. Great show tonight. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Thank you. Shout out to you. Best of
Thank
luck
you,
with your
man.
show. It's always an
Grambino,
honor.
thank you all for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll be back. And Dave's here. He's welcome back on the show anytime.
My man. Thank you. Appreciate you, Bill.
I appreciate you. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. Till next time, man. See you later, Dave.
Later.